In this video, we're going to explore how to put the train on the track and begin to animate the motion as it is on the track. And doing that, we're going to use the file that was given to you, the straight track component. I'm going to go ahead and open it up. We're going to set up one thing that we can do with our assembly. And with the track, I'm going to go to the assemble panel. And I want to choose something known as joint origin. So if we do have certain, or if we want to set up our own custom joint origin snap points, we can do so utilizing the joint origin command. So here I'm going to utilize a snap. Now this goes off of a pre-existing snap. So what I'm going to do is, for our train, is I'm going to choose this snap point right here that's right on this circular edge. And I'm going to go ahead and click. Notice the arrow directions. So the arrow directions will affect which direction our train is going to go into. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rotate this around 180 degrees. So that way this arrow is going to move down the track, and because we want this to be the back end and this is going to be the front end. And I'm going to go ahead and then do an offset. As I grab this arrow, you're going to see that's the Y direction. So I'm going to offset this by 2 inches. So that way that gives our train body some room to be able to fit onto the track. And I'm going to go ahead and say OK. This is going to establish the joint origin. Notice the circular edge is kind of noting which direction that goes in. I'm going to go ahead and hit the save button. And I'm going to go ahead and close the straight track file, open up a new untitled design file. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. This one, we're going to call this train on track. And the reason why that we want to go through and have a separate one, so when we go to create our working drawings, we don't want to worry about the track piece. The track piece is not part of our, is not really part of our components, but it is part of the project just to see some of the modeling, and it's nice to see some of the animation that you can do with it and show some of the realistic motion you can get. But it's not really part of the working drawings or the manufacturing. So I'm going to show the data panel, and here we're going to bring in, I'm going to right click and I'm going to insert into current design one of the train track pieces. And this one here I'm going to go ahead and set right in the middle on the origin, and I'm going to bring in 2 more. So I'm going to drag and drop. Now when I bring in the second one, I'm going to grab this arrow, and you're going to notice it's going to by 1 inch increments, and I'm going to set this at 12 inches. Coincidentally, the train track length is 12 inches, so this is going to be placed appropriately once I go through and get that set in. Drag in another component, another track component. I'm just going to do 3 right now, negative 12 inches, offset from the origin, and I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And what we can do here is actually, under the Assemble tab, you can use something called As Built Joint. So since these are perfectly placed where we had them, I'm going to do what they call an as-built joint. You can also use these if you model, like some top-down modeling, and model parts off of other components. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to choose the middle track. I'm going to choose, since this one here, actually we need to ground this one before I do that. So I'm going to expand. And I'm going to right-click on the straight track component and ground it. And then I'm also going to hit the top level, the sub-assembly that they're showing icon, and I'm going to ground it. So that way I know that this one is grounded. The middle one won't move. These other ones do move, like that. So I'm going to go ahead and revert that position back, and then go back to as-built joint. So now I can choose the middle track, choose the second piece that I created. I'm going to apply a rigid joint. If I hit the animate button, they're just going to shake, and I'm going to say OK. I'm going to repeat the same process, as built joint, choosing the second track and the third piece that I set in, and saying OK. And there we're going to end up having our track pieces all set up. Now I can go ahead and bring in the train assembly. So I'm going to go ahead and bring it in. I don't need any other parts. Closing the data panel, give me a little bit more screen space. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move the train over here. And I'm actually going to position it that way I can see the underneath side of the train body. And I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And from the visibility, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn off the joints, because that way we can kind of see things a little better. From here, I'm going to use the joint command. I'm going to change, before I forget, to the slider joint. And my snap point, I'm going to hit select to choose my first snap point. I want to choose the bottom of my train first, since that's the part that's going to be moving. And I'm going to choose this snap point directly in the center. Then, for the second snap point, I'm going to choose the joint origin on this piece of track that's all the way here in the back. So I'm going to select it, and that's going to set my train here in place. Now the sliding motion is going up and down, which is not really what we want. So I'm going to go to the motion tab, and instead of slide on the Z-axis, I can check the Y-axis, and that's going to give me the motion that I want. Now going back to the position tab, I do need to offset this for the wheels. The Z direction needs to be offset by 0.375. So, and then once I say OK to this, then you're going to see that the train wheels are going to sit directly in the grooves, centered, and they're going to be right on top of the grooves, as opposed to if we didn't set that offset of 0.375, they would be embedded down into the track. From here, we are going to now, under the Assemble tab, we're going to create a motion link. So between, and I'm going to expand the joints folder, the slider joint that we just set up, and then I'm going to expand the miniature train assembly, and in the joints folder for it, I'm going to find that Revolute 7, which is what I was using, and here you're going to see that animation start for our train. So everything looks good, it starts to roll forward, and then it comes back, and we're going to be able to change some of those things. The only thing I'm going to do is on the distance, I'm going to change, so it's kind of dictates some of the distance that it will travel, but instead of 0.394, I'm going to type 3.14, and then I'm going to multiply it, which is the circumference of our wheel, times 2.25, which is the diameter. And I'm going to go ahead and say OK. It's going to leave the train sitting there, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to collapse the joints for the train and bring that all back up like so. Here's our joints for the actual motion. So when I go to animate this, I can right click on slider 3, animate the model. You can see it's going back and forth, but again it runs off the track. It goes a little bit further. It actually goes a distance of really roughly about one of the track pieces. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and say cancel to stop that animation. I'm going to, you'll notice there's a little icon that shows up. Or if you right click on the slider, we're going to edit the joint limits. We're going to give this some limits as far as how far that it can go through and move. So as far as the sliding motion, the minimum we want it to be starting at 0, which is the position it's at currently. And then as I move this little menu, the maximum I've already kind of looked at to go from where it's sitting to the end of the track is 30 inches. So you're going to see it's going to show you how far the train body will run down. That'll really keep the wheels inside the grooves, and then we can go ahead and if we animate it, that's going to go through and show that sliding back and forth. I'm going to go ahead and say OK to accept it. Now when I go to animate my slider joint, animate model, now you'll see it does not run backwards off the track, and it runs forwards, coming to the front of it and going backwards. Now the speed at which that this is running, I think depends upon your computer, but there you can go through and you can see the train wheels moving and going back and forward. And that's how we can go through and get some realistic motion showing up on our train and working with the train.